Hello, Sports Psych class. My name is Jeremy Roche. I am a freshman at St. Thomas University and I am majoring in sports administration. We're required to make a presentation about sports psychology, and I have chosen the topic of the importance in mental strength in sports. Abstract slide. Mental strength in sports is extremely important. To play sports at a high level, you must have a very strong body, but more importantly, a very, very strong mind. Many people believe that most sports are 90% mental, but they are wrong. In reality, athletics are 100% mental and 100% physical. This means that you must spend an equal amount of time working on your mental game as your physical game. If you do not, they will come out of balance and allow you to have slumps or cold streaks. It is impossible to perform at the highest level without a strong mind. Only the best athletes in the world have fine-tuned their brains and bodies to be able to perform at the level that they do. In this presentation, I will be talking about why it is important to have a strong mind, how being mentally weak can damage your performance, and also giving a few examples of some of the strongest mentally tough athletes ever to play sports. So why being mentally tough is important. Mental strength is important in sports because it influences how we perform just as much as our physical aspect. If you are weak in the mind, then you will 100% be weak on the playing field. Our thoughts influence our actions, and our actions influence our thoughts as well. According to Doug Gardner, writer of a sports psych article that I used in this presentation, he says that for every physical component of a sport, there is an equally important mental component. Fine-tuning your brain is much harder than tuning your body, because it requires patience and is a huge process that you cannot complete by yourself. To practice being mentally tough is also hard, because it is very difficult to replicate game-like situations and how your brain acts during a game. When you are locked in a game, you don't see anything around you and you can barely hear anything around you except for your teammates and coaches. Your body is full of adrenaline and you have just a completely other level of focus that you can just not achieve in practice. If you are mentally weak, this is why it's bad. The mental aspect of sports is what separates the greatest athletes in the world from the normal ones. Normal athletes spend 100% of their time just focusing on their physical part of their game. Now, this can only take you to a certain level. If you don't work on your mind, you'll eventually just get destroyed by other opponents that are as good as you physically, but have a fine-tuned mind that can just take over games. So the great ones, they find extra time to work on their brain so that they can perform at the highest level when the time comes. A weak mind leaves players susceptible to things like a bad cold streak or a shooting slump, and also trash talking from the opposing team. This happens more in pro and college sports. The quote in this picture, as on the bottom, says, "Champions never complain, they are too busy getting better." This means that you should never quit after a loss, setback, or injury. You just get up and go and perfect your craft each and every day, and you will fulfill your potential. A perfect example of a coach who knows how to train their players in their mind and body is John Wooden. He's a legendary basketball coach, and he would always talk to his players about how never giving up and giving 100% effort in everything you do is very important to help you play better in games. So now this is the part where I will talk about some athletes who recently have dominated their sports respectively. The first one I will talk about is Tiger Woods. He is probably the number one or number two most mentally strong athlete ever. He played in the biggest crowds golf had ever seen and was not fazed whatsoever. He was known as a prodigy since he was 2 years old. The amount of pressure put on him since he was a young kid was unprecedented and something we had never seen before. He has clearly delivered, with having won 14 majors and 79 PGA Tour wins. With all that pressure, one would think that he would at least be a little bit rattled, but his mindset is so focused on winning that anything other than the ball and the course doesn't matter when he's playing. It doesn't matter who he's playing against. He knows he is better, and his game will show it. He is the most intimidating factor on the golf course without even stepping on the course. If you're playing in a group with him, you will be intimidated just from his name. There are multiple reasons that ESPN named him as the #1 most dominant athlete of the last 20 years. One of the biggest reasons they brought up was his mental dominance over the other players. My second athlete that I will talk about is NBA player Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is a proven winner and champion. He had the strongest mental game to ever step foot on a basketball court. He would try and destroy his opponent's minds before the fourth quarter even ended. His sights were set on becoming a pro basketball player from the beginning. When he was cut from his high school basketball team in 10th grade, he went home and locked himself in his room and cried. Obviously, he went and practiced and just perfected his craft, and he went on to make the North Carolina basketball team. He became one of the best college players ever and ended up being drafted in 1984 to the Chicago Bulls. And his career, we all know what happened. Part of the reason he was so good was because he was able to turn on his game mindset whenever necessary and dominate the competition. Every player that he played against says that he was the most mentally tough player they'd ever seen and that his mindset was like no other. He even retired from basketball, played another professional sport, baseball, for a while, and then came back to basketball and won 3 more championships. To be able to play 2 professional sports requires a lot of mental capability as well. He was learning one sport for his whole life and then just switched and played another professional sport. That is truly incredible. He retired in 2003 as the leading points per game average in the history of the NBA and is widely regarded as the greatest basketball player of all time, although I believe LeBron is. This is because his game was also great, but also his intimidating demeanor when he stepped on the court. The next athlete I will talk about is the only female on my list. She is on my list because she is clearly the greatest in her sport to ever play. Serena Williams is one of the most dominant figures in sports for the last 2 decades, regardless of gender. Her tennis game is extremely overpowering, and her mental game is just as powerful. Once she gets in her zone, her opponents have no chance because she is pretty much just that overpowering. In between points and during points, she is not focused on anything but destroying her opponents for the next shot. She is the definition of a true champion. Her resume includes 23 singles major championships, 4 Olympic gold medals, and countless other tournament wins. She has been the #1 player in the world for over 250 weeks. That is almost 5 years being #1. She has well surpassed over $70 million in tennis earnings, which is incredible for a female, and has earned much more from other endeavors. When she decides to retire, she will undoubtedly go down as the best in women's tennis ever. As well as being mentally tough on the court, her mental toughness shows off the court. A few years ago, she injured her foot not during a match, at her house stepping on glass. But because she was so determined to play, she came back and easily regained her #1 position and dominated. Another example, which is the more known one, was that she won the US Open while she was pregnant. She is obviously the only professional athlete ever to do that, which is pretty incredible. My final athlete that I will talk about is F1 driver Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton will most likely go down as the most accomplished and fastest F1 driver of all time when he retires. This past year, in 2017, he won his 4th Formula One World Championship. He said, after he won, that his mental strength was the key to beating his rival Sebastian Vettel. With 8 weeks remaining in the season, Lewis Hamilton was down 14 points in the driver's standings. And after the last race, he won by an astonishing 66 points. He even said that he believed that he won not because of his skill, because they were obviously relatively equal and their cars were relatively equal as well. but he won because of his mental strength off the track and his focus on the track during the race. High school sports. The mental game in high school is much less demanding than pro and college because there aren't many players who are mentally strong, and also there aren't many players who will go on to play at the next level. That being said, there are still parts of sports where you have to be mentally tough. Let's say you're in the championship game and you lose a heartbreaker. You have to just get up the next day, go and work on your craft so you can win the championship the next year. Also, if you suffer an injury, you have to have the drive to get better, nurse the injury, and return to their game stronger than they were before. One of the most debated topics in sports is women versus men, but that debate is usually the physical side. This is the mental side. So obviously there is a physical difference in sports between men and women. But is there a big mental difference? The answer is yes. The male athlete is usually more aggressive than the female athlete. This is because men play more contact sports and more physically demanding sports than women, so the aggression that is in the sports is ingrained in their brains. This makes them think and have more mental toughness because they need it to thrive in their sport. It is a rare case to see a contact sport being played. They usually are just versing themselves in a sport and just have to perfect their own craft and not try and beat anyone. So that's why they are more calm during their athletic games. Conclusion. Wrapping up, mental strength in sports is as important as physical strength because it can alter how you play. Many people should focus more on practicing their mental game, and that could take them to the next level. If you look at the picture below, this shows the 4 C's of mental toughness: control, commitment, challenge, and confidence. Here are my references that I used to complete this presentation. Thank you for listening, and that is all.